Welcome to People Like You. There's a high rate of suicide among young people both here and abroad. Becoming What God Intended Ministries is a Christian nonprofit organization specializing in training programs in China and North America dedicated to providing resources to aid in this war. Dr. Ekman is here with us today to share about this ministry, so don't go away.
I was astonished at the level of change that came into my life overnight. Amazing experience. The truth has to become more than informational. It has to become intuitive. When it's intuitive, it's powerful.
Welcome back. Dr. Ekman has been in ministry for over 40 years. He is here today to talk about Becoming What God Intended Ministries, which is saving lives both here in North America and in China. We appreciate you being here today. Let's start off by telling us about the organization.
Our nonprofit is an educational nonprofit, and we specialize in producing materials and curriculum that Christian organizations can use both in Southeast Asia, North America, other parts of the globe. In China, we have a special project with the universities of Beijing.
Yes, because I understand there's a high suicide rate there.
Tremendously high. And the tragedy of it, in a sense, is that these are among the brightest and best students in China who go to the universities in Beijing.
Wow. Well, you brought a video.
Yes, we have.
Let's watch that, and then we'll come back and talk a little bit more about the suicide rate. Okay.
With the world's second largest economy, China remains a robust engine of growth in the global market and in its own country. But keeping up with the economic and social pressures has taken a toll on this land of 1.3 billion people who are seeking to balance a modern society with traditional values and beliefs.
Several serious events happened last year on Beijing University campuses. At my school, there were a couple of suicides, a robbery, and a murder. As counselors, we felt like we failed, like we couldn't help anyone. I think the biggest issue is a societal one. When your economy has been pushed to develop so rapidly, people are bound to feel stressed.
According to China's Ministry of Health, suicide is the second most common cause of death among China's youth and young adults after traffic accidents.
People feel so much pressure. Personally, I think it's because they don't have a belief system. Many of the students I counseled came to me depressed.
Despite the government's pledge to address and invest more in mental illness, including renovating psychiatric hospitals to creating a free crisis hotline, there is still a stigma. Many are reluctant to seek help. With only a handful of trained psychiatrists to counsel those suffering from mental illness, the Association of Counseling and Research at the Universities of Beijing reached out for help.
When I entered counseling, I wasn't yet a believer. I had been taught all the usual techniques, and I studied under the best teachers our country had to offer, but the instruction felt hollow.
The good gift of pain.
In 2009, Dr. David Ekman began bringing teams of American psychologists and counselors to train mental health workers and professors at Beijing universities on how to deal with some of the challenges they faced.
When Dr. Ekman came to teach the first time, I was the first to speak up because I felt the importance of values. My counseling experience has taught me that techniques are not as important as our ability to relate to people and their emotions.
For the past 2 years, hundreds of teachers and mental health workers from the 26 universities of Beijing have participated in these workshops. Dr. Ekman's curriculum is based on Christian values, and the Chinese teachers and professors know that the speakers are all Christians.
I'm not religious, but I know Dr. Ekman is a Christian. Our work differs as he uses his faith to help people, and my work does not involve religion or faith. But I think his methods are worthwhile and a valuable tool for us. We use the resources and knowledge we have for good, but it's not as powerful as God. So I think Dr. Ekman's work has greater lasting impact.
Our goal is to introduce and apply this training and curriculum to universities throughout China and Southeast Asia to help prepare and equip the next generation of counselors.
Well, it seems like the program is applauded by both Christian and non-Christian organizations. in terms of what you're able to accomplish there. Tell us about the students.
The students are in a highly competitive atmosphere, and in the one-child policy in China, they have to succeed because there'll be two sets of parents, two sets of grandparents who are looking at them to be successful. Under that kind of pressure, that produces one of the highest suicide rates in the world.
Wow.
And the result is double-edged, because the student, when he or she commits suicide, usually leaves 7 other students in their room who are just devastated by the experience. So about 5 years ago, our organization was asked to bring over teams that would address that issue and to train counselors in the 60 counseling centers in the universities of Beijing. It's an epidemic problem, but we hope it's a problem that can be addressed through the training that we provide and what the counselors learn and what they practice.
And in the video, some of the counselors spoke about the fact that yours actually came from feelings and dealing with what these students are actually feeling, which gives the impression that that is not a system that is used there.
Oh my goodness. Emotions are generally repressed, and the counseling training in China really is the passing of aphorisms, nice insights, nice truths, go do this and that, but it normally does not connect with what's going on in the emotional life of the student.
Okay, and then we have a lot of students from China that come to America, like at UC Berkeley and some of the other schools around here. And how are they affected?
Well, they're affected in the same way. They're coming out of a culture that's performance-driven. They're the best and the brightest, and they absolutely have to succeed. And if they don't succeed, they may end up coming up with some reason to stay in the United States so they don't have to go back and face a sense of failure.
What is it like ministering in a location so different than our society?
It's delightful. It really is delightful. It's in some strange way, it's like being in the United States in the 1950s, where everybody is purpose-driven, serious-minded. They're there to do noble and virtuous things. They're all members of the Communist Party. They're all polite, and we love the atmosphere we're in. It's quite a unique thing, and I was quite surprised by their receptivity and by the interest in what we do.
In fact, one of your pamphlets actually talks about how the Communist Party backs your program. Is that true? I want to hear more about that. I'm sure there's an explanation. So more with Dr. Ekman when we return. Don't go away. We're back with Dr. David Ekman, founding member of Becoming What God Intended Ministries. And I briefly spoke of this before we went to the break. This is called Skills for Living. Tell us about this resource.
That resource is a curriculum I've written on mental health for the counselors at the counseling centers in the University of Beijing. And what's fascinating about it, and I didn't realize this for about a year, is that at the very bottom,
Right here,
right there, it says we're approved by the Communist Committee for Information and Propaganda of Beijing. I didn't know that. And then secondly, we're approved by the Ministry of Education and the Association of Counseling and Research. We're well approved.
That you knew about. I just want to take a moment to look inside here.
And what it deals with,
and
it's English and Mandarin, and it really addresses key mental health areas for the students and the teachers. Depression, that leads to suicide. Anxiety, that leads to suicide. Identity, values, male-female relationships. Just the things that make for positive mental health.
And you have seen results.
We have seen results.
How does that make you feel?
Feel great. Feel great. Now the results are anecdotal based on the 1,000+ counselors and mental health teachers that have gone through our training programs. So it's not one of these finely tuned research projects, but we've seen significant changes in how the counselors approach students and frankly how they approach their own lives.
So talk to us about all the different aspects of your ministry in China.
Okay.
It's going to take a while. Maybe pick the top ones.
Well, the top two is working at those universities, and then the second one is that we have a heavy demand for discipleship material. In China, they have no problem with conversions. The conversions are magnificent, huge numbers. The great challenge is in the area of discipleship. So our organization has been asked to produce a curriculum on Christian discipleship, biblical discipleship of 5 courses. And that's our main project along with what we do in the universities of Beijing.
And how does the government welcome that or recognize that, the conversions?
Once numbers go into tens of millions, any government would have to tolerate those numbers. So they tolerate it, and they have this sort of gentleman's agreement that if the churches do not push them, they will not push the churches.
So how many churches do you think are working with your program now?
That's a good question, because a lot of them are house churches and they don't report, but we've been told there's 5,000 plus churches in Beijing alone, 5,000 churches. And a good number of those churches have been exposed to that material. They like the secular mental health material. It's helpful to them. Plus, they've been exposed to our discipleship material. And what I find fascinating, really fascinating, is that the leaders of these churches have said that it's the most culturally sensitive material that they've come across that has been translated from English into Chinese.
Is it because emotion is not recognized as highly?
They're in a tremendous transition. And the culture at large recognizes the importance of emotions and relationships. So that when you have material that can actually explain sort of the idiot's guide to emotional life, that can explain the basic realities of emotional life, they grab it up.
They crave it.
And when they grab it up, it's different than how North Americans grab it up. Those folks are into curriculums. And if they grab a curriculum, they run with it. It's great to be ministering in Asia because we are a curriculum company, a nonprofit company. And when you see people grab it up, pour their lives into learning it, and then pour it into other people, that's a delight to see.
And lives saved.
Hearts change, lives change.
You've been a pastor for 16 years now?
I used to be a pastor for 16 years. I've been in ministry for 40. Been a seminary vice president for 7 or 8 years. Been a seminary teacher for about 2 decades and a half.
What do you appreciate about what you're doing now versus when you were a pastor?
One of the things that is a challenge in pastoring is a lot of committee work. But with this, we're targeting people, we're targeting the human heart, we're targeting changing churches and cultures, and we're not wasting time.
Would you say that you work mostly with believers in China, or tell me what that mix is of believers versus non-believers?
Well, the last trip we made was about 10 days ago. And so a part of the week was dedicated to being in the universities all day long. And then the weekend before and the weekend after, we ran 2 training events for strategic churches in China and strategic leaders in China who were in Beijing. And so it's quite a mix. I would say it's 60% working with believers and 40% working with the universities.
Does the format change when you speak in a university versus a church?
Well, the rules certainly change. You can't give the gospel and you can't refer to God. But what we make a point of is all the teams of trainers we take over to work in the universities. They're committed believers who believe the Bible, love the Lord Jesus Christ, and they're nice.
All right, in 10 seconds, when you would normally say Christ can make a difference, what would you say in the university instead?
Base your life on these values and you will see life change. Then they ask the question, where do they come from? And then I say, after the class, I'll tell you.
We talked about skills for living, and you also have some discipleship curriculum we can talk about. Is that true when we come back?
Absolutely.
All right, so don't go away. Dr. Ekman, you may have some personal reasons as to why you're interested so much in mental health. Is that true?
I grew up in a non-Christian home, alcoholic dad, turmoil, converted out of a pagan background at 17. And what I found in Christianity was not only solid truth, but a foundation for a healthy emotional life. Wow. And my concern is that Christian truth is allowed to continue deep into the recesses of the heart. The emotions, the instincts, those things that cause so much turmoil in people, that drive some people to suicide, others to despair.
So diagnosing yourself, had you not found Christ, and I'm assuming it was through family member or friends?
Friends at school.
Okay. So had you not, where do you think you would have been?
In a great deal of trouble, because at 17 as a junior in high school, I was astonished at the level of change that came into my life overnight. Amazing experience. If that path had continued, well, a lot of my relatives are alcoholics. Some are in prison. There is a path that leads in that direction, and thankfully, the Lord kept me from that path.
When you help and you hear of someone who may have been ready to commit suicide and they no longer are, because you took the time to put together some very complicated materials, you're kind of helping someone like yourself.
Well, yeah. That particular workbook you're holding in your lap,
yes.
There's a group at UC Davis that has gone through that for 5 years straight, repetitively, over and over again. I met the leader of the group, and he said that actually prevented 2 suicides.
Ooh.
And I dropped my jaw, and he looked at me and smiled, and he said, "I'm one of them." And so I thought, well, that's a good statistic. Out of one small group, 2 lives saved. But the reason why I believe that's effective is that it does address the core issues and what's going on deep within us and in our emotions, in our instincts, in our perspectives.
And those are the key.
They're the key ingredients that cause problems. The truth has to become more than informational. It has to become intuitive. Okay. When it's intuitive, it's powerful. When it's information, it's helpful advice.
So when you take it as your very core and your very foundation instead of an opinion, then it changes your life.
It changes your life as the person believes it, integrates it, and uses it to change their instinctual life.
Okay, so becoming what God intended is a study for spiritual transformation, and you have these tools available. They're available to anyone.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, and we also have a Chinese version.
I'm going to show that now. It's called Becoming What God Intended Workbook, and
it's all Chinese.
All Chinese.
Simplified Chinese, though, which doesn't help either you or I.
And these are also available in the States.
Yes, they are.
All right. So, Dr. Ekman, we're about to conclude here today. What is it you'd like to share with our audience about what you do or what you hope to accomplish in the next decade?
China is going somewhere. Everybody in China knows that that country is in movement. The one great dark horse is the Christian church in China. And the healthier that can be, the more change for the positive that culture will go through. So our great concern is that we get solid material into the hands of tens of thousands of churches in China. And that's entirely possible. So the concern is over the next decade that this curriculum that will be soon finished in 2015 will expand throughout China. We're recruiting members, Mandarin-speaking members for our teams. We have about 40 to 50 volunteers who are participating in this enterprise. We're looking for more. We're looking for support. We're looking for prayer.
You mentioned that there are some, I don't know if the term is underground churches, but churches.
House churches.
Okay, house churches is the term. Which kind of speaks into a belief that government is keeping track, perhaps, of those that do convert to Christianity so that one day they may crack down. What do you say to that?
My personal opinion is those days are past because the numbers are too huge and there are too many prominent individuals in China who have become evangelical believers. The government wants to hold back this tremendous tidal wave, but frankly, I think it's at a point where it's impossible.
Okay. Well, we appreciate you being with us today. And in Northern America, which is where we live, and this program will be viewed, what can we do for our friends and loved ones that are dealing with depression?
The thing that fascinates me is that the basic proofs, the basic truths of Christianity are designed to address depression. The simple reality of God as an Abba Father, a good Father. But that can't be conceptual understanding. That has to be heart understanding. The truth of our new identity in Christ. The great problem in depression is a false, ugly, self-hating identity. The great power of Christianity, it gives a tremendous identity in Christ. The basic truths of Christianity create a bedrock in the soul that when the emotions of depression hit, the person has a solid place to stand.
Amen. Amen.
But it doesn't change the fact that depression is tough. It's a horrible experience to go through. But if you have a place to stand, you can survive it. And when it passes, you can thrive.
Great. Thank you so much for sharing that. For more information about Becoming What God Intended Ministries, or to contact Dr. David Eckman, visit www.whatgodintended.com or ktln.tv. Remember that KTLN is a donor-supported ministry, and programs like this one are made possible through your support. Thanks for being with us. Join us again next week.